high slot and shoots. He scores. Quinn Hughes in overtime, and he's the leading rookie scorer in the NHL.
Your Vancouver Canucks live here.
Here's Horvat with a partial break down the left wing. Bo Horvat in clean. He scores. The captain does it again.
This is Canucks Central with Bick and the Boss on Sportsnet 650.
What is going on? Welcome to Sportsnet 650. It is Canucks Central with Bick and the Boss. But, you know, we've done the first 2 days of the week with no Boss. Now we're doing, at least today, with no Bick. I'm Jamie Dodd filling in for Bick Nazar. Craig McEwen, the Boss, is back from a couple of days. Well-deserved off. Canucks Central is brought to you by Avenue Machinery. Give yourself the Avenue advantage. Stay under the cap by saving thousands on select Kubota skid steers and excavators. Visit avenuemachinery.ca. And C-Mac, welcome back. I hope you had a restful couple days and you came right back, and Bick decided to turn tail and run away. I don't know what it is with you guys. It's very hard to get you on the same show, even though your names are on the title.
Yeah, I don't think he likes working with the Boss very much. Is that the problem? Is it me or is it everyone else?
I don't know.
You ever work with those people that it's always someone else's fault? Like, oh, yeah, the reason this didn't happen, it was this guy's fault. Or you know, that person doesn't do this. Well, you know, and at some point when you say that all the time, like I do here at work, when I start blaming everyone else and pointing the finger to save my own rear end, you know, you got to look at yourself in the mirror every once in a while. So I'm going to look at myself after the show and say, you know, could it be me, or is it just the fact that, you know, Bick doesn't have a very good work ethic and you know, doesn't like to chip in or help out? It might be the case that it could be him too.
We might have to open that up to the listeners or put out a poll question or something at some point. Like, which of you is the reason that you guys so rarely actually work together? You know what I mean? Is it Bick scaring you off, or is it you scaring Bick off? What's the root of the problem here? But whatever it is, I'm as always happy to be filling in and riding shotgun with you, C-Mac. And it's Canucks Central at noon. Look, the Canucks played last night, and you know, C-Mac, normally when we're coming off Canucks game, it's Canucks Central. We are going to do a deep dive into everything that went down in that game. But right now, we know, you and I both know where we are in the season. A 5-0 loss last night in Winnipeg. You know, yeah, there are takeaways. There are still things you can learn about certain players on the team. But in terms of pouring over minute by minute what went down in that game, I mean, this is a little bit what we've come to expect from the Canucks down the stretch here, right? It's not the most entertaining, meaningful hockey we've ever seen. Let's put it that way.
Well, I think as we do the evaluation of a season and look at the end of the year, you know, who do these games really matter? And I know the players will all say, oh, we're playing for jobs next year. And in Travis Green's case, he's still looking for a new contract. So there's things that matter. But in reality, under the lens of what's going on at the moment, for me, it's more watching a kid like a Jack Rathbone and how he's handling the NHL, this certain situations that he's put in, you know, on the power play, but at the end of the first there makes a bad pass, recoveries. And you could see Travis Green, you know, talking to Newell Brown. It was a great cutaway on the TV as I was away and not listening to the radio, full disclosure. Sorry, Batch and Hirsch. But honestly, you could tell him, you know, can't read lips because they have masks on, but he's probably saying, okay, talk to the kid, calm him down, tell him that's not the best decision to make. But what I liked and what I saw was A, that skating ability to be able to correct the mistake, but B, you know, he's getting more reps, more opportunity, more chances, and his comfortability, if that's a word, is looking more and more like an NHL type player than a raw rookie that's come in just a few games ago.
He looks like he fits, right? And we've seen this a lot over the last few years in Vancouver, where a rookie comes in and almost right away you can at least point at them and say, oh, that's an NHL player. And you know, there's still debate to be had about the ultimate upside with Jack Rathbone, where he might slot in the lineup next year, the year after that, all of that. That we can debate that, and we're going to have that discussion. But I think we can pretty safely say right away, okay, this guy can play in the NHL. And it reminds me a little bit of what we saw from Niels Höglander at the beginning of the year, right? And in those first few games with Niels Höglander, it wasn't, okay, this guy's going to be a bona fide 30-goal scorer for a long stretch of his career. It was, okay, this guy's an NHL player, and then we'll figure out the rest later. And to me, that's where we are with Jack Rathbone after these handful of games. And there's still lots of questions to be answered, as I said, about his ultimate role on the team, but we've checked one box with him, which is this kid can help an NHL team. He can help the Vancouver Canucks right away. 650 is the Dunbar Lumber text line, the smart alternative. Visit Dunbar Lumber on Bridge Street in Ladner or Arbutus in Vancouver, online at dunbarlumber.com. Get your comments in. What have you liked about Jack Rathbone so far? We also, of course, have Don't At Me coming up at 1:20, so you can get your submissions in early for that. And you know, C-Mac, Bick and I talked about it a little bit yesterday on the show, but just with Jack Rathbone, as I said, we've kind of checked that box. So we know that he's going to be a part, or at least we have a very, very high degree of certainty that he's going to be a part of the team. And now the question more is, what role is he going to play? Because I think, you know, if he had come up and struggled, or, you know, not had a sparkling performance in his first taste of NHL action, maybe we'd be going into next year's training camp saying, okay, this guy's going to fight for a roster spot, or he's going to fight to be on the third pairing. But now there's a chance that, I mean, this guy could end up cracking the top 4 going into the training camp. And it's an interesting question, because obviously the Canucks have a couple of relatively high profile veteran UFAs on defense, and how much stock should the club and should management put in what Jack Rathbone's doing here? Do they let it change how they approach negotiations with, for example, Alex Edler or even a Travis Hamonic?
You need NHL defensemen to play at this level. And you know, what's apparent with Rathbone is that he has the skills to do so, but his resume so far is one of just a handful of games. And can he do it over a long season? And can you rely on someone like this? You know, my point, Jamie, would be, can you have two similar type defensemen in stature, in size, and skill, and the way they play the game, in Hughes and Rathbone? Is that something that's sustainable over the entire NHL season? So my question, you know, when it looks like a guy like Alex Edler, is that we know that he's getting slower and older, but at the same token, he can eat up some penalty killing minutes. He can play possibly on that third pair. So I would say that before you're all in on Rathbone, and that's why these last few games are going to be so important, is that we need to see where he's at, what he can do, can he handle it? And again, the sad part of it is going to be, on some levels, that these games don't mean much outside of those auditions. And when you're playing a Flames team that's going to be resting players, are we going to get a true representation of where he's at?
Well, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Flames and the Canucks series in a few minutes here, but I mean, it's one thing when the games are meaningless for the Canucks, but at least, you know, the Jets are trying to tune up before the playoffs. The Oilers are trying to get McDavid. They were trying to get McDavid 100 points. You know, those teams still had something to play for. I mean, these games against the Flames, you're right, C-Mac, it's going to be very hard to draw any conclusions about players on either side, because it's unprecedented, the situation that these teams are being put in and asked to play games when other teams are going to be playing in the playoffs already. So you're right. How much information are we really going to get out of these final games from Jack Rathbone? You know, the point you make about Quinn Hughes and Jack Rathbone is an interesting one. And I don't want to say they're identical players. I know that's not what you're saying, but there is a similarity in style there, right? They're both left-handed shooters on the blue line. They skate well. They make that pass well. They're offensive-oriented defensemen. And I think Quinn Hughes is better defensively than what he's shown this year. I think his upside on that end of the rink is much higher than what we've seen this season. I think Jack Rathbone has some decent upside there as well. But your fundamental point is, look, these are two guys who want to get up in the rush. They want to play a certain way. And can your, you know, two of your top 3 defensemen in the future be those styles of players? And I just think if the Canucks had a bunch of guys who are maybe more traditional two-way defensemen coming in the pipeline behind Jack Rathbone, then maybe you would look and say, okay, one of Hughes or one of Rathbone, maybe they become a trade chip. But if you decide you want to go out and make a hockey trade and involve Jack Rathbone in that deal because he duplicates a lot of what Quinn Hughes does, man, there's not a lot coming up behind those guys in the prospect pipeline. And as you said, at a certain point, you need NHL defensemen. If Jack Rathbone is an NHL defenseman, I'm not sure this team can afford to look at trading him for stylistic reasons. You know, at a certain point, you just need guys who can play, and if it's not a perfect style fit, you have to figure out a way around that.
No, for sure. And, you know, the thing of it is, when you look at building an NHL roster and a team, and in this day and age, the way the game is played, with those young, mobile, hard, you know, skating players, they're very valuable to you. But I guess, Jamie, I look at it and go in the bigger picture, and it's hard to, you know, look at thinking about possibly trading someone after they've only played a few games. But could it be a chip that you could move something to get something different down the road is kind of where, you know, I look at the two of them and hey, they could anchor that back end together for a very long time, and the power play could be excellent. And hey, maybe too much of a good thing or a similar thing is all right. But in that case, as you look to piece things together, you know, could he be a chip to move something to get something different that you need because you already have something similar of that stature, size, and skill set?
A couple of texts coming in here in the 650 Dunbar Lumber text line. The great thing about this draft is that the top 10 is loaded with blue chip defensemen. That's an unsigned texter suggesting that maybe actually they could think about moving on from a young defenseman as a trade chip in a bigger package because they'd be able to restock in the draft. And just as a reminder, at 2:00 today, we'll have Sportsnet's draft analyst Sam Cosentino on, so he can give us a little bit more information on which defenseman might be available in the Canucks range. But, you know, you mentioned the idea of packaging a young player into a hockey deal for a bigger piece, C-Mac. And earlier today on the station, on the morning show with Halford and Bruff, Paul Hamilton, who covers the Buffalo Sabres for WGR Radio in Buffalo, he was on the show. And of course, there's so much drama surrounding that team in Buffalo right now, the Sabres, with Jack Eichel's comments, with other players potentially hinting that they'd be open to a trade. And Paul Hamilton brought up a player's name that will be very interesting to, I think, fans in Vancouver, and suggested that Sam Reinhart might be interested in making a move closer to home.
You know, Reinhart said in his end of the year thing that he's going on 26. He's not up for a rebuild.
Yeah,
it's not what he's looking for. And you know, I've heard that he wants to be traded to the West Coast. That's where he's from, as you well know. He's from Vancouver area. He'd like to go out there.
That's Paul Hamilton again from WGR Radio earlier today on the Halford and Bruff show in the morning. And again, suggesting that Sam Reinhart, who is of course from West Vancouver, might be interested. He didn't say Vancouver specifically, but he said the West Coast. So obviously, of course, that could mean Vancouver, the California teams, Seattle now, maybe even a place like Vegas. But still, I think that's enough to get fans here interested. There's been so much talk about Jack Eichel wanting out, and should the Canucks be in on that? Is Sam Reinhart actually the more attractive piece for the Canucks to pursue out of Buffalo, though?
That's a great question. But I guess it comes down to, again, dollars and cents and what you'd have to give up to get him. You know, there's crazy talk out there the Canucks would go after Eichel. I don't see that in the sense of just the salary that he's being paid and all that. But with a Reinhart who will be looking to get a raise of low 5 point whatever up into the sixes, is that a player that you would, you know, have playing wing or center, or can you afford to pay a third line center if Bo moves or he plays there? Like, it's an interesting dilemma, but if you think about it, Jamie, in the sense of, you know, they couldn't get the deal done with Toffoli, or they ran out of time, or he wanted, you know, money the Canucks didn't have at the moment, and Francesco and company didn't want to pay that type of money. Is Reinhart a guy that you could plot on the wing, or now you overpaying again for a winger that, you know, I guess could play center in a pinch? But we see that a little bit right now with JT Miller, and is that the scenario or the road you want to travel down?
Well, that's the big question with Sam Reinhart for me, C-Mac. And by the way, you're listening to Bick and the Boss here on Sportsnet 650. Jamie Dodd filling in for Bick Nazar. And as you say, you know, Sam Reinhart has played more of his career on the wing, but they used him at center this year. And the reviews that I've seen out of Buffalo, very, very positive about how he performed at center this year. So if they decide to make Sam Reinhart available on the trade market, it's going to be as a center. And they are going to try to price him as a center. And we know how expensive it is to go out and acquire a high-end offensive center like Sam Reinhart. And I'm not putting him in, as in the group of bona fide superstars around the league, but he had a very productive season. He has that draft pedigree. If teams view him as a center, the price is going to be extremely high. And if you're the Canucks, do you want to pay that price for Sam Reinhart? Then you have to pay him because, as you said, he's an RFA who's going to be looking for a raise. So then you have to give him a hefty salary. And then you have a dilemma of, do we move Bo Horvat to third line? Can we find enough minutes for him? Or do we go out and use this guy that we just paid a center price for and a center salary for on the wing? And is that really going to be the most efficient way to improve this team? So I like Sam Reinhart a lot as a player, and I think he took a big step forward this year, and the goal production was excellent in a very difficult situation in Buffalo, but it's kind of an awkward fit for the Canucks, I think, even as nice as it would be to bring, a local kid home to star on the team.
Yeah, I obviously believe, and the Canucks know they have to make themselves better in so many different areas, but until the Hughes and Pettersson deals are signed, sealed, and delivered, how difficult, Jamie, is it going to be for Vancouver to do these sorts of things unless you can make a straight up hockey trade, money in, money out, and how does that work to bring in a player like a Reinhart and not knowing exactly what he's going to want as a restricted free agent? And the other thing too is, no disrespect to Reinhart, he's a good hockey player, but how many of these guys have we seen put up good numbers in their contract year, and then once the deal's done, that consistency or that production isn't there all the time? And I would say Jake Virtanen did that last year, going into a deal where he needed a contract, and he puts up a lot of points, and then this year he struggled on the ice. Reinhart, in that case, can he sustain what he put up this year points wise, or is this something that the history of hockey and pro sports, for that matter, is littered with guys in their option years put up great numbers, and then after that, yeah, they're okay, but they don't live up to what they did when they're looking for that new money.
I mean, I hear you. Obviously, the career high in goals, tied a career high in goals in just 54 games. That's really impressive. But he's been a productive player. Maybe not what you want out of the second overall pick, which is obviously where Buffalo took him in 2014. But he's had productive seasons. So even if his scoring dips a little bit from where it is this year, he should still be, I think, a very, very solid player for whatever team he ends up suiting up for next year. This comes in from AP Langley. No thanks to Sam Reinhart. Way too much of a minus player. He doesn't play defensively well. We've got some other texts coming in that we'll get to in Don't At Me in just a couple of minutes here. You can get your early submissions in 650. And yeah, another text come in unsigned. Reinhart has put up 20 goals year after year. He's been a very consistent goal scorer. Again, it's not the high end production that you thought you were going to get out of Sam Reinhart when he was lighting up the WHL, but it's still very, very solid. It's just tough to see a way to make it fit with the Canucks. Just before we do get to Don't At Me, C-Mac, you and I were kicking this around before the show, and they're about to play this 4-game series. I know it's split up with a game against Edmonton there, but the Canucks are about to play this 4-game series against the Calgary Flames, and we all know what happened with the Flames and the Canucks in the offseason. The Flames raiding the Canucks' cupboards of talent, taking Tanev and Markstrom and Josh Levo and Louis Domingue. But all of a sudden, both teams are on the outside looking into the playoff picture, and for as disastrous as the Canucks season has been, is there actually a case to be made that Calgary is in a worse position just because they went out and committed so much money to this roster and still fell flat on their face?
Totally. Jim Benning and company knew exactly what they were doing in the offseason when they didn't want to spend.
Yeah, like it worked out just like they drew it up.
Hey,
right?
Just how they planned it. They knew that they would lose their best player to injury for most of the year. They knew that COVID would hit the team, so why spend the money? Listen, tongue-in-cheek, being a bit facetious, but in all reality, if you're a Canucks fan and the Canucks did load up and bring all these people in, how would you feel right now? I believe that, if you look at it, you're like, okay, we didn't spend the money. We're disappointed we're not in the playoffs, but is it a write-off year? Because, listen, we still don't know, and we'll never know probably till exit meetings and guys talk in the summer about how tough this COVID season was on players from a mental point of view. The physical aspect, yeah, maybe guys weren't as best shape as they were, but mentally just the grind of going on the road and not being able to get out of your hotel room and all that sort of stuff that in the scenario where the Canucks and ownership, I would say Francesco Aquilini looked at it, he probably went, do I put money into this, and is it wasted money? Are we chasing something that, in all reality isn't attainable? So why not bank it until life turns back to normal, more people are vaccinated? I'm not so certain that they have an exact crystal ball and this is what they were planning. They couldn't bank on a Pettersson injury or getting hit by COVID. But at the same point, when it comes to the finances, maybe the idea of just standing pat this year as opposed to what Calgary did, getting a Markstrom and a Tanev and older guys and their windows a lot, tighter and closing a lot quicker than maybe Vancouver's. Maybe it was the prudent move by the Canucks to do what they did now that we have the benefit of hindsight.
C-Mac, I don't know what the thinking was in the Canucks front office that led to them allowing the Flames to sign Jacob Markstrom, allowing the Flames to sign Chris Tanev. I don't know what they were thinking. And, to be honest, I think this front office hasn't necessarily earned the benefit of the doubt. But I said even at the time, look, if one of your divisional rivals wants to pay those guys at that age that kind of money in term, fine by me. You let them, right? And Calgary's hope was, hey, look, we might feel these contracts at the back end when these guys are a little bit older and these are inefficient, but we'll get really good value out of them for the first couple of years. And we'll take a run at this with this current core we have. It didn't work out at all. Those contracts look really, really tough right now. And you're right. I mean, whether it was by design or by pure luck, at least the Canucks didn't invest heavily on the salary cap in the last offseason, right? Only to then fall flat on their faces. Again, I don't know how much credit you assign to the front office for that, but you look at the situation in Calgary and you have to think they seriously regret those contracts they handed out last year. It's Bick and the Boss here on Sportsnet 650. We do it every day at this time. It's time for Don't At Me. Don't At Me for leasebusters.com. Need or want out of your lease? Avoid early termination and negative equity costs by going to leasebusters.com for guaranteed lease relief. Get your submissions in 650 to the Dunbar Lumber text line. Got a good one here from Shiloh. I like this one. You should get a 25% pay increase, Jamie. Bick and C-Mac worth half as much as you. Don't At Me from Shiloh. I mean, I like what I'm hearing there. Shiloh.
Shiloh's a big fan of yours. We get a lot of Jamie Dodd love. Judge Jamie. Big votes for Judge Jamie.
I'm sure you didn't listen to the program yesterday, C-Mac, because you were on vacation, and I understand it. But I made a very selfish request on the show yesterday, which was I requested everyone to text in and pester you about getting me on the air more. So hopefully, even when I'm not here with you and C-Mac, or with you or Bick, you'll still keep getting those texts from my fans out there in the listenership.
Yeah, okay. Let's stop sucking up for Jamie and let's move along here. Don't At Me. Canucks should explore the idea of dealing JT Miller for Sam Reinhart. And another piece, clock is ticking on Miller's patience level, and I have a feeling he won't accept another year of losing. That's Alistair in Clearwater. That would be an interesting move to get off on JT Miller, who's a little bit older. And I like the job that JT Miller's done here in Vancouver and kind of the one of the heart and soul kind of person in the locker room. But yeah, maybe moving Miller and moving on for Reinhart, although I'm not so sure Buffalo would do that, but perhaps they look at it and need a bit of a culture change there and make Jack Eichel happy. Maybe bringing in JT Miller would be the thing.
JT Miller is the piece you'd look at just because you're getting the salary off the books, and you need to do that to make the math work with Sam Reinhart. But yeah, is Buffalo going to take a player who's older than Reinhart back as the centerpiece of that deal? I'm not so sure about that. Johnny Mack says, don't at me, but trading either a talented but fragile player like Elias Pettersson or a struggling defender like Quinn Hughes, the Canucks have dynamic assets available to trade for a more proven center like Jack Eichel or Sam Reinhart. Well, you're not trading Pettersson or Hughes for Sam Reinhart, right? That's just a straight-up talent downgrade. No. And even including one of them for Jack Eichel, I know it's been easy to fall out of love with Pettersson and Hughes this year, but I'm still betting on that talent, and I'm betting on both of them bouncing back next year. So I don't think that's something I'm exploring either.
No, hey, listen, Wayne Gretzky got traded. You can't say anyone is untradeable, but at the end of the day, if you think about it, um, those two players, Hughes and Pedersen, are your future. They're young, they're exciting. The best thing about it, Jamie, in my opinion, is they have room to grow. Like those two guys can get better than where they are right at the moment, and that's the core with the Thatcher Demko in goal. That's the foundation and core that you can build around and have for 10 plus years, as opposed to a 3 to 4 to 5 year window, a la what the Flames did when they brought in Tanev and Markstrom. Their window is obviously a lot not as wide open as Vancouver's.
Final don't at me here. We got to get to Dixon Ward on the other side, but unsigned text, don't at me. Rogers Arena will be empty next year too if Jim Benning isn't fired. A little bit later in the show, we will talk about the future of the Canucks coaching staff, future of the Canucks front office. We'll hear from Elliot Friedman and Chris Johnston on that. They've had a couple of interesting things to say, so hold that thought, texter. Keep your text coming in. We'll do some don't at me overtime on the other side. But as mentioned, longtime former NHL player, former Vancouver Canuck, Dixon Ward joins the show next. It's Bick and the Boss on Sportsnet 650. Welcome back to Bick and the Boss here on Sportsnet 650. It is still Canuck Central with Bick and the Boss on Sportsnet 650. Canuck Central brought to you by Avenue Machinery. Give yourself the Avenue advantage. Stay under the cap by saving thousands on select Kubota skid steers and excavators. Visit avenuemachinery.ca. Former Canuck Dixon Ward, a regular here on Bick and the Boss, is going to join us momentarily. A couple more don't at me's to get into here. CMAC before we hook up with Dixon. This one comes in unsigned. Make an all-out push for Rasmus Dahlin, Hughes, and Miller. You levy too, maybe. Sign Sam Reinhart for a hometown discount. I mean, I like the aggression. I like where your head's at. I don't know what Rasmus Dahlin has done to be have more value than Quinn Hughes at this point in their respective careers, but hey, I get it. Bring the hometown kid Sam Reinhart back on a discount. It would be nice if it happened. I'm not sure he's going to take a discount to come back and play here, though.
No, I don't think he's going to take a discount. I mean, there's other teams. Yeah. That clip saying in West Coast. I mean, there's a few other teams on the West Coast. Seattle, for one, being a new one that eventually, you know what I mean? Like, so. Oh yeah. I don't know that he will have to take a discount. Hey, it would be great if he wanted to come back, but his discount might be at $5 million. It's not going to be at a number that's sizably lower than what the Canucks would like to pay for a third line center or I guess a winger of a top six who could play with maybe a Horvat and a Pearson.
Don't at me. Demko carries the Canucks to the postseason next year. That is from Bim Jennings, creatively named there. I mean, look, that's when you have a goalie like we think Thatcher Demko can be, that's always a possibility, right? That he carries your team to an impressive record. You always have to at least factor that in as a possibility. We saw what Thatcher Demko did for an extended stretch earlier this season. If he has a full 82 game season as the undisputed number one, you never know.
Yeah, and we also saw what he did a game, not last game in Winnipeg, but the game before. Like he's starting to come together and find his form pre-COVID. And listen, the future is bright with Thatcher Demko in goal. He's a guy who, again, is looking at a role here in Vancouver where he's the number one guy. He still has to go through some ups and downs. There's going to be a bit of a learning curve there. But bottom line, yeah, I think it looks really good for him moving forward.
It's Bick and the Boss here on Sportsnet 650. I'm Jamie Dodd filling in for Bick Nazar. Craig McHugh, the Boss, is back after a couple of days off. We are going to welcome Dixon Ward to the show in just a couple of moments. As a reminder, you can get in on the conversation. 650 is the Dunbar Lumber text line, the smart alternative. Visit Dunbar Lumber on Bridge Street in Ladner or Arbutus in Vancouver, online at dunbarlumber.com. We were talking about how the Canucks offseason went and losing the players to Calgary. Did it actually work out for the best for the Vancouver Canucks? Unsigned text says you forgot that Benning tried to sign Ekman Larsson and ran out of time to sign Tyler Toffoli. And the Toffoli one is really the one that stings. And again, it's not even hindsight to say that, because at the moment, that was the one that really hurt. And then you see what he's done with Montreal this year. But I think if they had let Markstrom and Tanev go, but found a way to keep Toffoli, the vast majority of fans would have been really happy with how the offseason went. Sounds like we have lost C-Mac. We will do our best to get him back on the line, but fortunately, ready to go and joining us on the line now. He is a regular on Bick and the Boss, former Vancouver Canuck and longtime NHL player Dixon Ward. Dixon, thanks very much as always for making time for us. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. And how are you?
I'm doing very well. We're just trying to work through some technical difficulties. We'll get C-Mac back on the line here momentarily, but I wanted to start by, the Canucks at this stage, obviously they're out of the playoffs. They've got these last handful of games to play, and about the only bright spot right now is that they have some young players getting their first taste of NHL action. And, certainly in the case of Jack Rathbone, performing pretty well in their first handful of NHL games. When you see a player step into the league for the first time, what are you watching for to see right away, okay, this guy can cut it or this guy can't? What are those signs that you can see, even in a handful of games, that tell you a lot about the player?
Well, I think I don't. First of all, what the dangerous thing to do is to make a judgment that he can play too soon. So I think what this opportunity is for a guy like that is to look and see if he's worth continuing to look at. You know what I'm saying? So how you see that is, what's his decision process on the ice? What's his confidence level in his playmaking? How does his head work? Obviously, the physical things are easy to see. Can he skate? Is he strong enough to compete with the big bodies around the league? But you're really looking to see, is he consistent in his decision process? Does he have the skill set to continue to execute the way we want him to execute? And do we think he's mature enough and smart enough to be able to do it consistently? And so once you've come to the realization, this kid, has got a chance, then you know what you have going into next year, going, okay, we got to give this guy a real chance to play when it really counts. And if a kid shows up and plays and he sticks out like a sore thumb that he's not ready, then that changes the way you look to the future. So I think he's done everything he can do to give himself that next chance, which is to be a full-time NHL player next season.
Dixon, when you broke into the NHL with the Canucks, you had an extremely productive rookie season, 52 points in 70 games. You were making the jump from the NCAA, the University of North Dakota, right to the NHL. What do you think it was that allowed you to have pretty immediate success in your first try at the NHL level?
Well, there's two things. There's two things that go into it. One is I got to play with good players right away. I think my first NHL game, as I told the guys a couple of weeks ago, I was playing with Bure and Greg Adams on a line. So I got the opportunity, and Pat Quinn gave me the opportunity to play with good players right away. I was a little bit older. I wasn't 19 years old coming in. I think I was 23 years old coming in, a little more mature, physically more mature, and confidence-wise, I had confidence right away because I had a chance to play with a real good group. That made a big difference. The second thing was I got lucky. As I found out at the end of the year, sitting with Pat in my year-end meeting, about 4 or 5 games into the season, they had a plan to send me down to Hamilton. And I was supposed to be a healthy scratch in the morning, and they were going to send me down the next day. Well, I think Jeff Corkman got the flu or something. I went in the lineup and played that night against Calgary, and I ended up with 2 goals and 2 assists, and there's no way they were going to be able to send me down the next day after that. Otherwise, the fans would have went crazy wondering what they were doing. And then after that, I got into the groove and started to produce consistently. So I got lucky, but you put yourself in that position by having a great training camp and having a good chance to play with good players. So that all worked out for me. And it happens sometimes the opposite way when you don't get the right opportunity, you don't get to play with the right people, and you don't get lucky. It's just a real precarious spot to be a full-time NHL player, and that's the tough part.
That's a fascinating story because you're right. It's so often it can work out for some players, but there can just as easily be a bit of bad luck that, sends you back down to the AHL. And some guys who are extremely talented might never get another crack at the NHL level. Joined by Dixon Ward here on Bick and the Boss, Sportsnet 650. Jamie Dodd filling in for Bick Nazar. And, just on the subject of making the jump to the NHL for the first time still, Dixon, we always hear from players that the biggest difference between the NHL and lower levels is the speed of the game. Was that what you found? Was the speed the hardest thing to adjust to when you made it to the NHL?
Not particularly. The American League is the difference isn't the speed. I don't think there are a lot of guys in that league that can move as well, and maybe the speed in which the play develops is quicker. The depth in the NHL is so much greater. Everybody that's putting on a pair of skates in the NHL can play, and they can play at a high level. And so every time you're on the ice at the NHL level, you're playing against someone that's as good or better than you are. In the American League, well, at least for me, but again, I'm not, I wasn't a top 3 guy. So most players are better than me. So the point being is, in the American League, it's just a little higher IQ, a little bit stronger maybe, and a little bit more talented top to bottom, and that's the difference. But a bigger jump is going from junior college to the American League. That's a bigger jump than the American League to the NHL, in my opinion.
In conversation with Dixon Ward, former Vancouver Canuck and longtime NHL player here on Sportsnet 650. And, Dixon, as I said, only a handful of games remaining for the Vancouver Canucks and not much on the line. So we're starting to turn our attention to the beginning of the playoffs, and specifically here in the North Division. Now we know the matchups, and I think, one that everyone's very excited for is the Toronto Maple Leafs taking on the Montreal Canadiens. It's been so long since they've met in the playoffs, and just as a hockey fan, we'll get into the analysis of the series a little bit, but just as a hockey fan yourself, how excited are you to see those two rivals lock horns in the playoffs this year?
Well, it's bittersweet because it's super exciting to be able to watch them play, and it's disappointing that the fans in those two centers don't get to watch it live, and that would just add a tremendous amount of more of excitement in those two cities. But it's going to be an exciting series, and I think it's going to be a hard-fought battle, and it's going to be really interesting to see. And I know it's going to create a lot of excitement in our country to watch those two storied franchises go after it. So I'm excited to watch it. It's going to be cool.
And I know, the Leafs have been looked at as a juggernaut pretty much all season long. They've had a couple hiccups here or there, but I think based on the odds, the handicappers like the Leafs' chances in this series. What does Montreal have to do to make it a competitive 7-game series?
I think with Montreal, first of all, Toronto deserves to be there. They put the numbers up. They won the game, so it's really easy to try to criticize Toronto. I've done it my whole life, and I'm an alumni, for crying out loud. But they've earned the right to be considered that right now. For Montreal, it's about competing right off the bat. If they can win one of the first 2 games, then they'll make a series of it. If they get behind the 8 ball quickly, then I think they're in trouble. So they're going to have to really, really buckle down, play strong defensively, get excellent goaltending, be opportunistic and get their power play going. And if they can do that early, then they can hang in there, and you never know what happens. As the series goes longer, anything can happen.
Dixon finally got reconnected here, but you talk about goaltending for the Habs. How important, will that be? Let's talk about the Leafs at the other end of the ice. Like, if Montreal can win the goaltending battle, that could be the difference in the series. And I know Toronto, for all its firepower, for all the veterans they've added in a Thornton and a Simmons, and they seem to have all the pieces. Would you not suggest that it could come down to goaltending in this series, the team that walks out of it and wins?
Well, I don't know if winning the goaltending battle is going to be enough for Montreal.
Yeah.
They have to win it, and then they have to win the special teams battle as well. So Toronto wins the goaltending battle, they're going to win the series. That's all they have to do. But Montreal's got to put together 2 or 3 victories in different areas of the game in order to give themselves a chance. So just the goaltending alone isn't going to do it, but it's going to be necessary to give them a chance to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So if we look at the other series, and again on the goaltending front, the Jets, I liked what Winnipeg had and put together. I know they didn't address their back end maybe by just getting a Ben there at the end, which adds to it, but they could have done a little bit more. But it's really been Connor Hellebuck who's struggled here. In your history and playing in the game, can a goalie find their game going into the playoffs when they struggle down the stretch, or is it something that it's such a mental position, and you've seen it with young kids and guys you develop up in the Okanagan? Can they recapture it, or is it once it starts going sideways, is it really difficult, especially when it ramps up the pressure in the postseason?
No, I truly believe any player, and goalie included, can find their game, because what happens is it totally separates the two entities. The regular season's done, it's washed. The game changes, as we all know, whether we like it or not. The game changes in the playoffs. It takes on a whole new look. Every single play becomes paramount to the overall success of the game. And so, everyone's going to tighten up. The goalie's going to tighten up. It's a fresh start. He looks in the mirror. He says, "Here we go. We're in the playoffs. That was our only goal, was to get here." Regardless of when he struggled or when he didn't struggle throughout the year, it's a brand new season, the playoffs. So it's at all possible. He comes out, he has a real good first game, and the rest is history for him. So it's not an issue of carrying any of that baggage into the playoffs with him. It's just a matter of preparing properly to start the new season with a positive frame of mind, and hope your team surrounds you with good play. If they do that, then he's got the talent, as we know, one of the most talented goaltenders in the world. He gets some confidence in the playoff format, and he's going to be tough to beat.
A few more minutes here with Dixon Ward, former Vancouver Canuck, and a regular here on Bick and the Boss Sportsnet 650. Sticking with the Winnipeg-Edmonton matchup, Dixon, obviously when you're talking about the Oilers this year, all of the focus is going to be, rightfully so, on Connor McDavid and his incredible season, and then also Leon Draisaitl. We know what he's capable of, but I think it's kind of flown under the radar a little bit is on the blue line how well Darnell Nurse has played for them and how much he has stepped up. And going into the playoffs, and specifically, you're looking at a team in the Winnipeg Jets with a lot of high-end offensive firepower, and then if you get past them, you might have to face the Leafs, another very high-octane team. How important is it for the Oilers to have a bona fide number one minute-eating defenseman like Darnell Nurse on the blue line for the playoffs?
Well, I think it's super important, and something they've really missed, I think, over the course of time in Edmonton. They've been looking for it, and they were very patient with Darnell Nurse. And as defensemen, young defensemen, it takes them longer to really come into their own in the NHL. It takes them longer than it does a forward, to be honest with you. So he's just starting to mature into that role. And I know for a fact Davey Tippett's been a huge influence on him in that sense, and he's playing with his confidence, and he knows exactly what his role is on a night in, night out basis. So that really makes a player way more comfortable and prepared when there's no surprises. The expectations are set. He knows exactly what he has to accomplish, and they give him the opportunity to do that. So he's going to be really important to that group, regardless of McDavid and Draisaitl. There's no secrets to their plan. But Winnipeg finds a way to shut those guys down. Darnell Nurse is going to have to turn around and do the same thing on the other side.
Dixon, just one last quick one. You talk about trying to shut down, let's say, a Draisaitl and McDavid, but in McDavid's case, and you saw the great one up close, Wayne Gretzky, and how good he is and how impactful they can be, especially come playoff time. Can you shut down a Connor McDavid? Like, is it possible to contain him to the point where he's not a huge factor in a series?
No, there's not. But there's a way to minimize how great he is, if that makes any sense. And
yeah,
and typically everyone he focuses on, okay, we got to stop Connor McDavid from flying through the neutral zone and beating our D and going in and shooting in the net. But he does so many other things well, and what he does better than anybody gives him credit for is he creates time and space for his teammates, and he makes tremendous plays. And so what what happens sometimes with teams is they get so ultra focused on shutting Connor McDavid down or taking away his speed or trying to get up ice and angling and eliminating that runway, and they forget about the guys coming in the back door or the drop pass to Draisaitl or those types of things. And I think you got to play away from the puck extremely well. You have to shut down his play options and then try to play as hard one-on-one against him as you can. If you start overloading him, he's going to pick you apart. And that's what he wants to do. He wants to drag all the attention to him, and he'll be happy to score 25 assists and no goals in the first round if he has to. So you got to be real careful about the other four guys on the ice and not spend all of your time just trying to shut him down from going to the net. So it'll be interesting to see. Paul Maurice is an extremely smart coach, one of the smartest in the game. He'll have a good plan, and it'll be all up to whether they can execute it or not.
Dixon, always appreciate the time, and this time next week, at least south of the border, there will be playoff series underway for us to talk about. Really looking forward to that and looking forward to getting your thoughts on them next week. Thanks, and have a great day.
Awesome, guys. Thanks very much.
That is Dixon Ward, former Vancouver Canuck and NHL player, and a regular here on Bick and the Boss on Sportsnet 650, getting his thoughts on some of the young players performing for the Vancouver Canucks right now and also on the 2 North Division playoff series. And C-Mac, I know you are, you're a proud, born and raised Vancouverite. You're a Toronto hater in a lot of respects, I know. Are you buying into the hype at all for the Leafs-Habs series, or are you rolling your eyes at all of it?
No, I'm buying into the hype. Listen, I can remember 79, the last time they played. It was exciting. Those are 2 storied franchises. I want to see that. It's really too bad, Jamie, that we couldn't see a packed Bell Center or in Toronto. But I am buying it, and I believe that this will produce some great drama early on in the postseason.
Yeah, I remember, I spent some time in Montreal, and I never went to a Habs-Leafs game, but I remember being out at a bar even near the Bell Center when they were going to play a regular season game on the Saturday night. Even the bar felt like it had a playoff atmosphere, right? Where you had the groups of Habs fans and the groups of Leafs fans jawing at each other. So, I mean, I could only imagine if it was actually the playoffs, what that city would be like, what both cities would be like. You're right. It is too bad. As we've said it so many times, right, over the last however many months, if only fans could be in the building for that one. But it should be great theater on TV anyways. The Canucks will not be in the playoffs. They will be in the draft lottery. We're going to get a better idea of who they might be eyeing with their first round selection, who might be on the board when they step up to make the pick. Sam Cosentino, Sportsnet's draft analyst, is going to join us next. It's Bick and the Boss here on Sportsnet 650.